Discover how a millionaire CEO's unexpected hug changed 10 lives forever in this amazing tale. Jim Parker stood at the edge of the glass-lined conference room, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the gritty city outside. Rich, powerful, and feared, he was a self-made millionaire, but beneath the polished surface, loneliness gnawed at him. The whispers of layoffs hung heavy in the air like an unshakable fog, rippling through the halls of his tech startup. He looked at his reflection, hard lines etched on his face, and confronted the emptiness that followed him everywhere, a dull ache that never quite faded. Sarah, a young coder, was among the team floundering in this atmosphere of dread. Just 24, she was already battling the stress of impending job loss while simultaneously facing the emotional toll of her mother's declining health. No one saw her. No one noticed her tireless work, the late nights spent debugging lines of code, simulating strength as her world crumbled at home. Yet somehow she found herself standing outside Jim's office, heart racing as she contemplated the ambitious project she was convinced could save their startup. But would he even listen? The day dragged on, filled with silence and apprehension. Jim paced through the fluorescent-lit hallways, each step weighed down by conflicting thoughts. Should he stick to the corporate script, or were sacrifices necessary? Fear of financial ruin danced with regret, igniting uncertainty about his leadership. He knew each name behind the walls he'd built, but the familiarity felt like a shackle more than solace. As he approached the break room, he overheard Sarah's animated voice. Intrigued and desperate for a shred of connection, he hovered just outside the door. Sarah's passion reverberated through the small space, her eyes alight with fervor as she pitched her plan. Impassioned, she insisted their fledgling team could innovate in ways the board of directors had yet to consider. Jim felt something stir within him, an echo of hope drowned in the river of his past, a childhood steeped in uncertainty. His walls began to crack. He stepped inside, and in a moment that felt electric, he enveloped her in a solid embrace. To Jim, it was a risk, a visceral connection he hadn't permitted himself for years. To Sarah, it was her lifeline, a flicker of warmth in an otherwise sterile landscape. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. News of the hug spread like wildfire. Those once caged within their roles began to share stories of perseverance, courage, and vulnerability. Rivalries faded, collaboration blossomed, and hidden talents emerged. But as Jim witnessed the unity growing among his employees, the weight of his decision settled like a hammer in his gut. Will I protect my interests or elevate the team that has rallied around me? A paradigm shift loomed at his doorstep. The clock ticked louder with every passing second, each click pressing him to choose his path. Was he prepared to sacrifice his reputation in favor of compassion? Or would he retreat into the safety of conventionality? Faces filled with hope and uncertainty lingered in his mind, pulling him in directions he hadn't anticipated. The final meeting loomed ever closer, the stakes echoing in his hollow chest. Jim's heart raced, a chorus of internal battles clashing, the compelling urge to protect but the undeniable hunger for something genuine, real. As he stood frozen at the precipice of his fate, he wore the weight of those who dared to dream on his shoulders, their futures teetering in the balance. One choice could redefine everything, igniting a fire of possibility or extinguishing the very spark he had just discovered. But the pulsing uncertainty remained. Would he shackle himself further with fear, or embrace the complexities of human connection at a moment when it mattered most? As the day of the final meeting approached, Jim's resolve wavered like a flickering candle flame in a gusty wind. His office, once a sanctuary of control, felt increasingly claustrophobic. He paced in circles, the walls looming in on him, each one lined with accolades that now felt hollow. Despite the outward persona of success, He grappled with the evolving dynamic of leadership that had begun to unravel around him. The warm embrace he'd shared with Sarah haunted him, highlighting an emotional connection he had long avoided. During the evening before the crucial presentation, Jim sat in front of his laptop, struggling to draft his speech. He could feel the critical eyes of the board weighing down on him, stifling any courage he attempted to muster. But alongside that trepidation was the urgent need for authenticity. He recalled the spark in Sarah's eyes and realized it echoed the collective potential simmering within his team. Their newfound camaraderie gripped at his conscience and rekindled a whisper of an idea. What if he led them not from the shadows of fear, but from a place of vulnerability? Fingers trembling, he began typing, crafting a message not just of strategy and numbers, but of human connection, the very essence that forged a resilient team. He closed his eyes, envisioning the faces of those he'd been too afraid to address with sincerity. Could he show them that he was human, capable of error, and yet unafraid to act? As the words flowed, he noticed clarity sharpen with each keystroke, clearing the fog that clouded his judgment. Jim realized that the strength of his leadership would stem from a willingness to embrace uncertainty and acknowledge that he didn't have all the answers. The next morning, he arrived at the boardroom, heart pounding. His reflection in the conference room glass was no longer a reminder of his isolation, but rather a testament to his ever-increasing awareness. As the meeting unfolded, Jim listened intently as his executives presented their fears regarding the layoffs and the inevitable crunch of numbers. Those around him echoed sentiments of survival over compassion, but he detected the undertow of anxiety swimming beneath the charts and graphs. When it was his turn to speak, Jim set aside the meticulously prepared notes and drew in a deep breath. He faced the panel, grounding himself in their glances, offering up a voice that trembled yet resonated with powerful authenticity. I was once a young programmer afraid of losing my job, just like many of you. I want to learn from you, and together, we will create solutions. The boardroom paused, absorbing his visible shift. From the far end, he caught Sarah's supportive nod and the flicker of hope dancing in her eyes. This wasn't just about business, it was about people. Emboldened, he transitioned to discuss the ideas Sarah had presented, framing them within a strategic vision meshed with the human capacity to innovate through empathy. Reactions were mixed. Some board members exhibited skepticism, while others leaned in closer, intrigued by the potential for a new approach. Jim felt invigorated by their engagement. His vulnerability was a new strength, laying the foundation for a culture not predicated on fear, but trust. As the meeting concluded, Jim realized the time had come to engage in a different kind of confrontation, one that challenged the traditional structures they had long upheld. But even as his heart surged with hope, the undercurrents of resistance loomed large, threatening to pull him back into familiar waters. The shift he envisioned hadn't fully taken root, and tensions remained. He had taken a step toward change, yet the looming possibility of backlash lingered like an uninvited shadow. What would become of his vision when faced with institutional inertia? How far was he willing to go to nurture this fragile connection? He stepped into the hallway, uncertain but with a pulse of newfound determination igniting his spirit. The answer to his questions felt imminent, and the time had come to face the very challenges he had once feared. Little did he know, he was just beginning to awaken a series of trials he had yet to confront. A storm was brewing on the horizon. Could he weather it and emerge transformed, or would he retreat to the safety of anonymity? With each step down the hallway, Jim felt a bubbling mixture of anxiety and eagerness surge through him. The board meeting had unveiled a crack in the monolithic walls of entrenched tradition, and with it came a rush of adrenaline. But as he approached his office, familiar doubts crept in. What if his efforts to cultivate a sense of trust and collaboration backfired? Could his vulnerability really pave the way for enduring change? Or was it merely a fleeting revelation that would soon evaporate under the weight of skepticism? Seated at his desk, Jim's hands hovered over the keyboard, paralyzed by the conflicting thoughts swirling in his mind. He could hear snippets of conversations from colleagues in the adjoining offices, punctuated by bursts of laughter and quick exchanges of ideas. He had shared in this camaraderie once, before his ascent into an isolated corner of leadership. Was his push toward transparency resonating with them, or had his newfound approach only stirred more apprehension? Pulling himself back into the present, he grabbed a notepad and jotted reminders of the small victories from the meeting. The tension that had lingered like a thick fog felt momentarily lifted. Sarah's nod of encouragement lingered in his mind, fueling his desire to engage further with the team. He decided to summon courage in the form of an informal gathering, inviting his department to share their thoughts openly without the suffocating demands of formalities. As the day unfolded, he crafted an email inviting his team to a coffee and conversations session. Would they respond with enthusiasm, or would they hesitate to engage with their boss in a less structured setting? His heart raced as he clicked send, the act itself feeling like a leap into an ocean of uncertainty. The response was rapid. Excitement bubbled through his inbox as colleagues expressed their eagerness to join him. Jim felt a warm glow of affirmation blossoming within him. Perhaps this was the start of something genuinely collaborative. On the day of the gathering, he meticulously arranged the conference room, ensuring it felt inviting and relaxed. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air as team members trickled in, their initial uncertainty morphing into casual banter as they began to relax. Jim felt his own nervousness dissipate as laughter broke the ice, and he decided to steer the conversation toward the authentic connections he sought to foster. Let's talk about the challenges we're facing, but also how our ideas can reshape our future here, Jim prompted, allowing the team space to share their fears and ambitions. He listened intently, his resolve solidifying with each story shared. Instead of the typical sharpness of corporate discussions, the dialogue unfolded as a purely human exchange, capturing raw emotions and genuine ideas. But there was still a tension lurking. Some voices were hesitant, their trust still fragile. Jim sensed a looming responsibility to ensure this openness didn't shatter under scrutiny. They were navigating uncharted waters, and he needed to steer with empathy while managing the potential for conflict. As conversations grew deeper, Jim recalled a lingering question that had surfaced within him. What did true leadership mean to him now? Was it merely the ability to direct income and metrics, or was it intertwined with emotional intelligence and connection? Navigating this path seemed daunting. He'd only scratched the surface of vulnerability. The transformative power of their gathering resonated within him, yet shadows of doubt reminded him of the resistance that awaited. Could he cultivate this space beyond the moment, fostering not just conversation, but lasting change? As the coffee cups drained and the last murmurs of laughter faded, Jim's determination crystallized. He needed to follow this path, but how far would the commitment and the trust extend? Just as he gathered to thank his team for their participation, a message notification disrupted his thoughts. It was from a particularly influential board member, an unexpected voice in this new narrative. The tension of anticipation thrummed in his veins as he opened the email, deciphering the tone behind the terse inquiry. I need to speak with you about the future direction of your leadership approach. With that, a new chapter awaited, one where the foundation he had tentatively laid now faced the scrutiny of established power. Would he bend, or could he stand firm in his vision for transformation? Jim leaned back in his chair, his gaze lingering on the glowing screen. The board member's message felt like a tightening noose around his newfound sense of agency. There was an unspoken challenge embedded between the lines. Was he prepared to defend this burgeoning culture of openness he had begun to cultivate? As he contemplated his response, contradictory thoughts collided. Was this the crucial moment where he could affirm his commitment to transformation, or was it an intersection of uncertainty and risk? He had hesitated long enough, allowing self-doubt to linger beyond its welcome. But now, the stakes felt tangible. After a restless night of fitful sleep, Jim found himself walking towards his office with the weight of both expectation and apprehension on his shoulders. What if engaging authentically actually alienated influential members of the board? The clash of ambition and compliance thudded in his chest. He dialed the number of the board member, his stomach twisting as he navigated through ringing tones. When the call finally connected, Jim steeled himself for a confrontation. "Jim, thank you for connecting." The board member's voice was cool, lacking warmth. Each phrase felt like a carefully calculated dart, aimed at his vulnerability. "I'm hearing some chatter about the new initiatives you've begun. To be frank, I'm not sure our investors will appreciate such a radical shift." His pulse quickened. It was as if the room had shrunk around him. "I believe transparency can enhance trust and innovation within the team," he countered, his voice firm. "We're at a point where the old methods are stifling us." The coffee and conversations session revealed insights beyond performance metrics, ideas that could truly drive us forward. "Metrics matter, Jim." The tone shifted, the tension thickening. "What you're doing could dismantle years of our structured methodology. Are you willing to put your own leadership on the line for these sentimental notions?" The challenge was palpable, pressing him against the wall of his convictions. Could he defend what seemed both idealistic and crucial for the future? Jim took a deep breath, recalling the warmth he felt during the informal gathering, a feeling he was reluctant to abandon. "I am willing to embrace calculated risks," he replied, the impulse mounting within him. "Our survival hinges on adaptability. We can't afford to cling to outdated practices indefinitely because they're comfortable. Trust is a currency, and I intend to enrich our investment in it." A moment of silence stretched uncomfortably before the board member replied, "I'll take this feedback into consideration. However, expect to justify your methods during the next meeting. Influential voices will scrutinize your approach." As the call ended, Jim felt the vibrations of his own resolve echo through him. There was no turning back now. His mind spun with the possibilities that lay ahead, mixed with the undeniable anxiety of potential conflict brewing beneath the surface. Returning to his desk, he began drafting a proposal that captured his ideas on transparency, collaboration, and commitment to nurturing the team. He envisioned a new framework that interwove emotional intelligence with tactical execution. But within him simmered a deep fear. Could the courage he was cultivating translate into actual change, or would resistance render it futile? Days passed with incessant buzzing in the office regarding his email. Colleagues whispered in hushed tones, more uncertain than ever about Jim's direction. However, amidst this, Sarah approached him, her eyes alight with interest. "Jim, I've been thinking about how you've started this conversation," she said, her confidence encircling him like a protective shield. "Maybe we could organize some strategy sessions to further develop our ideas before you present to the board. We need a united front." At that moment, Jim felt a flicker of exhilaration mixed with trepidation. It wasn't just about his leadership anymore. It was a collective endeavor. Would they risk their own positions for this vision? As he pondered Sarah's proposal, the fragile threads of enthusiasm and apprehension coalesced into a burgeoning understanding of leadership, not merely about a singular figure, but rather about shared aspirations. Just as Jim began sketching out potential topics for the sessions, a chilling message buzzed his phone with a stark subject line. "Urgent. Board meeting preparation." The new urgency within the message felt like a signal that his leadership journey was poised to transition from trial to a consequential performance. Was he ready to enlist his team's support for his vision? Or would it become another chapter of silence and resistance stifled within the corporate corridors? The intersection of vulnerability and action loomed large as he peered down the path ahead. With a deep breath, he tapped out a response to Sarah, feeling a surge of determination wash over him. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was the board member, standing with an enigmatic expression. "I'd like to discuss some adjustments to your approach," they announced, stepping into an atmosphere thick with tension. The moment of truth had arrived, each word from here on out carrying the weight of his aspirations and fears. The board member entered the office, a palpable tension swirling between them. Jim felt the familiar blend of nervous energy and the weight of his aspirations pressing down on him. The air was thick with unspoken expectations as he gestured towards a chair, inviting the board member to sit. "Let's discuss your vision," the board member began, leaning back with an inscrutable expression. "We can't afford missteps right now, Jim. The investors are watching closely." Jim swallowed hard, his mind racing. This was his opportunity to articulate his ideas, to sway an influential figure, yet self-doubt flickered at the edges of his confidence. "I believe that fostering a culture of openness will create a more resilient and innovative team," he started, carefully crafting each word. "We're at a crossroads. If we continue with our archaic methods, we risk stagnation. The board member's eyebrow raised slightly, a faint glimmer of interest breaking through the steely demeanor. You're suggesting a complete overhaul of our operational strategy? What makes you think your approach is sound? Taking a deep breath, Jim assembled his thoughts. The feedback from our recent team sessions has been overwhelmingly positive. People are eager to share ideas that can propel us forward. Isn't it time to harness that enthusiasm rather than stifling it? A flicker of acknowledgement crossed the board member's face, lending Jim a momentary sense of encouragement. I can understand your standpoint, but, the board member continued cautiously, the board isn't a group prone to drastic shifts without substantial evidence. Jim met their gaze, grounding himself in conviction. What if we gathered data to support these sessions? We could conduct surveys, track productivity changes, and assess employee satisfaction comprehensively. I'm willing to back my proposal with results, not just ideals. A glimmer of determination sparked inside him. This wasn't just rhetoric, it was a promise to himself and his team. Bold move, the board member replied, the tension in the room softening just slightly. But understand this, if you commit to this course, the responsibility falls entirely on your shoulders. If it fails, your position will be the price. A wave of anxiety swept over Jim, but he squared his shoulders. This was not just a risk, it was a transformative challenge he was willing to face. I accept that, but the potential for a more engaged, inspired workforce is worth it. The board member fell silent, a proverbial chess player pondering their next move. Jim felt the seconds stretch, every tick of the clock amplifying his resolve. He had never fully grasped the balance of ambition and risk before, but here he was, both terrified and exhilarated. Before long, the board members' expression shifted as they sat forward. I'll support the initial phases. Present your strategy at the next meeting, but be prepared for probing questions. Their tone drifted towards cautious approval, signaling a small victory in the larger battle. Just then, Sarah entered the room, a bright smile illuminating her face. I've been refining our ideas based on your feedback. We need to strategize this in detail. Jim felt a swell of pride. He wasn't alone in this. Support was materializing around him, creating a safety net for his vulnerable aspirations. They needed a comprehensive plan, and he realized in that moment how partnerships multiply strength. As they sat together, poring over the presentation nuances and aligning their perspectives, Jim found himself more focused than ever. He envisioned the imminent board meeting not as a hostile examination, but as an opportunity to advocate passionately for change. With the meeting day approaching, an undercurrent of exhilaration pulsated through him. Would they embrace his vision, or would skepticism quash his dreams? Just as he finished explaining their approach, a sense of clarity surged through Jim. He had found his voice and purpose. Yet, lurking beneath that excitement, a soft whisper of doubt echoed. Would this newfound courage sustain against the counter-arguments he would face? Feeling the questions loom over him like storm clouds, he braced himself for the storm ahead. Would his proposal transcend beyond intentions into meaningful action? As the clock ticked down to the pivotal moment, Jim understood that he stood at the threshold of transformation. But transformation often danced hand in hand with profound uncertainty. The board meeting was merely days away, and with it, a confrontation not just about ideas, but about the very essence of leadership he was beginning to embody. Would Jim's emerging resolve withstand the challenge that awaited? The days dwindled down to hours, and the weight of anticipation settled heavily on Jim's shoulders. Each tick of the clock was a countdown, not just to a board meeting, but to a defining moment in his career. As he prepared, he felt the urge to reassess the reasons behind his drive. Was it ambition, or was it the yearning for validation? Given the stakes, he couldn't afford uncertainty. Sarah had taken the lead in organizing data for the presentation, and in her quiet confidence, he saw a reflection of the very culture he sought to cultivate. A few evenings had been spent meticulously sifting through narratives that showcased the team's efforts. They transformed past meetings and ideas into tangible stories filled with promise. Jim scribbled down notes, piecing together a narrative that could inspire the board. Yet amidst the preparations, doubt nagged at his thoughts. Was he seeing the full picture? Engaging the team was only part of the equation. He had to face the board's skepticism head-on and deliver not just passion, but also solid proof of his vision's potential. Finally, the morning of the meeting arrived. He glanced in the mirror before heading out, forcing a smile as he repeated one mantra: "I am the architect of change." Each word felt heavy but also anchored him in purpose. If he wanted to lead, he had to embody the vision he was advocating. The boardroom felt quieter than he had anticipated as he entered, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside him. He took a moment, scanning the familiar faces, each one a mixture of curiosity and reservation. They were looking for cracks in his resolve, and Jim was determined to present a seamless facade. As he began the presentation, he could feel the tension shift slightly with each slide. He meticulously outlined feedback stats, projected improvements, and potent testimonials from his team. As he spoke about cultivating an open culture, his passion ignited. He shared stories, real ones, where team members had excelled after feeling heard and valued. Jim watched as some faces softened and familiarity turned into cautious optimism. Yet, there it was, the moment of confrontation. A board member, arms crossed, leaned forward. "These anecdotes are compelling, Jim, but they're still anecdotes. The investors won't just take your word for it. What will you do when results don't align with the enthusiasm you're selling?" His heart raced as the room held its breath. This was the question he dreaded, the pivotal moment where resolve could shatter. But standing before them, Jim felt an unexpected surge of clarity. Instead of retreating or becoming defensive, he focused on the larger vision. If we approach this with an adaptable mindset, we can integrate feedback loops to ensure our strategies evolve along with our findings. This isn't just idealism. It's establishing a foundation that responds to real-time demands. Surprised murmurs buzzed through the room, igniting a flicker of excitement in Jim. Perhaps, just perhaps, sincerity coupled with a willingness to adapt could resonate. Engaging not only with passion but authenticity seemed a new path toward genuine leadership. Before the meeting dwindled to a close, another challenge emerged. A late objection from another board member, questioning the financial viability of his plan. A chill crept over him. Vulnerability and fear were spiraling back. Yet, deep inside, through the storm of critique, he realized that these were just tests constructing his new resolve. "I appreciate your concern. However, we'll conduct quarterly evaluations to assess the financial impact, making adjustments to minimize any risk. It's a partnership, not a leap of faith." When the meeting adjourned, Jim felt exhausted yet invigorated. The board had approved the preliminary phase, though their skepticism lingered like a shadow. Securing their support was a crucial step, but a more insidious challenge remained, sustaining this momentum amidst opposition, criticism, and the hard work of implementation. As he left the room, a peculiar exhilaration bubbled within him. He had stepped into the spotlight and emerged with a hint of validation, but the path ahead loomed dauntingly. With every ally gained, another hill climbed higher before him. The storm was not yet over. Reflection had culminated in discovery, yet more profound trials lay ahead. This journey was only just beginning. And as he walked down the corridor, something in him quietly shifted. He realized change wasn't merely about ideas or plans, but about navigating relationships and the trust that was yet to develop. Would he manage to keep the spirit of collaboration alive when faced with the inevitable pushback from entrenched traditions? Would his vision truly ignite transformation, or would it flicker out under scrutiny? Each day would bring answers, but now he understood his evolution was intertwined with the team's readiness to embrace change. The days that followed the board meeting were both exhilarating and exhausting for Jim. What once felt like a singular experience had morphed into a kaleidoscope of emotions and responsibilities. He was riding the wave of cautiously optimistic momentum, but aware that, in the corporate world, success was rarely linear. He dove into action, initiating the quarterly evaluations he had promised. These would not just be an obligation, but a chance to foster transparency and accountability. His mornings transformed, filled with cup after cup of coffee, as he sifted through data, pieced together reports, and engaged the team with fresh ideas. Yet amidst the commitment to transparency, Jim grappled with an unfamiliar challenge, balancing enthusiasm with realism. Sarah had been not only a confidant but also an anchor. She had taken the initiative to gather feedback from team members after the meeting, their voices echoing Jim's emphasis on collaboration. The insights were enlightening yet revealing. Some expressed excitement, but others voiced skepticism. "Jim's vision sounds good," one team member noted, "but will it really work? We have a lot to lose." These hesitant sentiments tangled with Jim's own doubts. He pondered if these voices, though valid, were projections of his fear of failure. He found himself reflecting. Was he leading them toward innovation or simply chasing an ideal he hadn't fully grasped? That internal conflict simmered beneath his practiced exterior, a quiet storm brewing as he engaged in conversations about initiative execution. During lunch one day, Sarah approached him. "Jim, can I share something?" She lowered her voice, concern etched on her brow. After the initial chatter subsided, she laid on the table an uncompromising truth that had been forming during their conversations. "You need to recognize that not everyone shares your vision or energy. People have different experiences that shape their beliefs." Jim's heart sank. Wasn't this a lesson he had sold to the board? Navigating differing perspectives was essential, yet here he was, embodying the impulse to push forward without fully acknowledging the resistance. "Maybe, just maybe," she continued, "you should hold a team meeting to discuss their concerns openly." He was reluctant at first, fearing that bringing the skepticism into the open would derail the fragile momentum he had worked so hard to build. Yet as he watched Sarah's calm determination, he felt a gentle push toward what felt necessary. This was a chance to engage in honest dialogue, a testing ground for his own courage to confront doubt, not only in others but within himself. The meeting was set for the following week, and preparation became less about formal agendas and more about cultivating an environment where every voice mattered. He felt a familiarity in this approach, a testament to the very culture he sought to build. The morning of the meeting, he sketched out his thoughts furiously, recognizing the parallels between pushing ideas and nurturing trust. For the first time in days, he felt an unease mixed with excitement, a twinge of anticipation that perhaps, through vulnerability, he would strengthen these bonds, forging more than just a unified front. As the team gathered, the air buzzed with unspoken apprehension and hope. Jim noticed the anxious glances exchanged among team members, a palpable tension enveloping the room. Could this be the breakthrough he needed, or would it merely unearth fractures that were better left hidden? He opened the floor for dialogue, a shift from the precedents of one-way discussion he had relied on as a shield. He felt the weight of his own vulnerability as he encouraged them to speak freely, to voice not only their concerns, but their aspirations. In that moment of collective honesty, Jim was ready to face not just external obstacles but the internal fears that had whispered doubts in the dark. Would this decision lead to greater unity or threaten to unravel everything he had strived for? The stakes were higher than ever. As conversations ignited around the table, he braced himself for the wisdom that could finally illuminate the path ahead. Would he discover allies, or would he stumble upon deeper divides? This was a pivotal moment that transcended boardroom decisions, shaping not only his professional landscape, but defining his very essence as a leader. The unfolding discussions were sure to reveal unexpected truths about the team, the journey, and perhaps most importantly, about himself. As Jim sat at the head of the table, the murmur of anxious voices began to settle into a tense silence. He felt the weight of their collective uncertainty pressing on his shoulders, and for a fleeting moment, he questioned whether he had made a grave mistake in inviting this open dialogue. He cleared his throat, the simple act feeling monumental. "Thank you all for being here today. Let's use this time to be honest. I want to hear your thoughts, whatever they may be." The silence stretched briefly before Mark, a software engineer known for his analytical thinking, broke through. "Jim, I respect your vision," he said hesitantly, "but I worry about the risks. We've tried big initiatives before, and they didn't go well." Each word struck Jim like a pin dropping in a quiet room, creating ripples of acknowledgement among the team. He hadn't anticipated Mark to speak first. Perhaps it was the discomfort that prompted the engineer's input. While it wasn't a personal attack, it felt like a mirror reflecting his insecurities back at him. "Can you tell me more about your concerns?" Jim asked, leaning into the discomfort with a determined curiosity. Mark took a breath. "It's not just the fear of failure, but the uncertainty it could bring to our already stretched resources. We have targets to meet, and if we don't achieve them, it could impact everyone's job." Jim's mind raced through the implications. He realized that for many in the room, the stakes were not merely professional ambitions but a matter of livelihood. The deeply personal nature of those words gripped him. This was no longer about numbers or outcomes. It was about people. Sensing the room's gravity, Jim found himself shifting from advocate to empathetic listener. "I appreciate you sharing that, Mark. It's a valid concern. Let's put our focus on how we can mitigate those risks together." The atmosphere in the room began to change subtly, as others began to chime in, informing the discussion with their own fears and aspirations. Jim felt an unexpected surge of resilience. The vulnerability he had anticipated as a liability transformed into a bridge of connection between him and the team. By acknowledging their worries, he was inadvertently strengthening his role as a leader, not in spite of their concerns, but because of them. Sarah spoke up next, her voice steady. "Jim, it's not just about resources. Some of us feel like we're being pulled in too many directions. We want to support your vision, but we also fear that it might cost us the quality of the work we're committed to." Jim nodded, taking mental notes as each concern illuminated a path he needed to navigate more carefully. They weren't merely resisting the change, they were pleading for clarity and security. Jim's resolve strengthened. He reflected on the parallel between leadership and vulnerability. As he gave them space to express their reservations, he saw glimpses of potential. They needed not only to share in his vision but also to co-create it. Hours blurred into moments as the meeting pressed on, dialogue flowing freely. He facilitated the discussion, steering them toward constructive solutions, with each contribution revealing latent ideas and inspiring a sense of ownership. His doubts began to dissipate, revealing an invigorating potential for collective growth. As the meeting wound down, Jim felt a remarkable shift. It had transformed from a platform of tension into a collaborative workshop. Together, they had begun unearthing new strategies and innovative solutions. For the first time, he could see their collective vision taking shape, rooted in shared values rather than solely his aspirations. However, as the room began to clear, a gnawing thought crept back into Jim's mind. Had they merely scratched the surface of deeper issues? He left with a sense of accomplishment, yet questioned the foundations of trust he had assumed were in place. Outside, daylight faded into a cool evening. Jim took a deep breath, contemplating the potential breakthroughs that lay ahead and the buried divisions that might still linger unseen. As he walked to his office, a fire kindled within him. Would this moment lead to authentic transformation, or would it expose cracks in the foundation of his leadership? As he prepared for an even more critical meeting with the board next week, he couldn't shake the feeling that the true test of his leadership and of his team was just beginning. The stakes had never been higher. Jim arrived at his office, his mind a turbulent sea of thoughts and emotions. The meeting had felt like a breakthrough, yet uncertainty lingered like a fog. He needed to solidify the trust he sensed had been forged in the meeting, but feared that it might be superficial. Taking a seat at his desk, he stared at the whiteboard filled with fragmented ideas and strategies. They were destined to shape their collective future, if properly nurtured. Thoughts of his upcoming meeting with the board tugged at him, amplifying a pressure that clawed at his chest. How would he present their concerns without appearing weak? Would the board want to hear dissenting voices at all? These considerations weighed heavily on his conscience as he contemplated the decisions that lay ahead. He pulled out his journal, a trusted companion, and began to write. Today was a step forward. But how can I ensure this isn't just a momentary feeling? How do I translate today's vulnerability into lasting trust? The journal became a safe place to explore his thoughts, feelings, and innate doubts. He poured words onto the page, wrestling with how to approach the board with a strategy that showcased his team's strengths and addressed their concerns directly. In the midst of his reflections, Jim felt the need for a different kind of clarity. He didn't want to just prepare a presentation. He wanted to build a genuine narrative of progress to share with the board. To achieve that, he realized he would need to reconnect with each member of his team. Understanding their individual stories, their fears and aspirations would be crucial to crafting an authentic and persuasive story. The next morning, he decided to take a more grassroots approach. Rather than relying solely on departmental updates, he scheduled one-on-one check-ins with each team member, the software engineers, the marketers, even the support staff. As he reached out, he felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. This wasn't merely about gathering information, it was about establishing deeper connections. Sitting across from each colleague, Jim listened intently as they shared their thoughts. Their stories were poignant and revealing, exposing not just their professional dilemmas, but personal struggles and aspirations. As each conversation unfolded, Jim was reminded of the intrinsic link between trust and vulnerability. The more he shared of himself, his fears about the board meeting, the weight of expectations, the more they opened up too. In one particularly revealing exchange, Lisa, a junior designer, shared her concerns about feeling overlooked. "I'm passionate about my role and want my voice to matter. Sometimes it feels like our ideas don't get the same attention you give to others," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. Her vulnerability struck a chord with Jim. It reminded him of his own insecurities when he first stepped into leadership. "I appreciate you telling me this, Lisa. Your ideas are invaluable, and I can assure you that I want to hear more from you and the team," he replied, feeling an unexpected surge of commitment to address these circumstances head-on. By the end of the week, Jim experienced a profound shift in perspective. What started as anxiety about an upcoming meeting transformed into a network of genuine connections. Each story unearthed further understanding of what it meant to lead, not merely to direct, but to serve as a mentor and advocate. As he synthesized all he had learned, preparing for the board meeting became more purposeful. There was a new emotional thread woven into his narrative now, a deeper awareness of his team's collective resilience and strength. He salvaged insights, ready to provide concrete solutions amidst concerns, showcasing the collaborative spirit that had come to life in those difficult conversations. But as he entered the boardroom that fateful morning, a twist of anxiety gripped him once again. The gravity of the moment loomed over him, laden with doubt. Would they truly value the human perspective he was ready to share? Would vulnerable honesty be met with resistance or acceptance? Jim took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had a choice. This was more than a presentation. It was a powerful opportunity to redefine how leadership and team dynamics could shape their future. And as he approached the board members, Jim wondered if he was ready not just to lead, but to transform the very foundation of their organization. The moment had arrived. A test of authenticity loomed, one that would either solidify his vision or unravel it entirely. Jim Parker stood before the polished boardroom table, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on his chest. He had spent countless hours revisiting his thoughts and the insights gleaned from his team, their collective voices echoing in his mind. This meeting was not merely a presentation. It was a culmination of transformation, a testament to the evolution within both himself and his organization. With a composed breath, Jim began to speak, his voice steady and sincere. "Today, I want to share not just figures and strategies, but a narrative forged from the voices of my team." He paused, gauging the board's reaction. Curiosity glimmered in their eyes, tinged with skepticism. Over the past weeks, I initiated discussions with every team member to better understand their perspectives, both on our current challenges and the vision ahead. A crucial theme emerged. Our culture needs to embrace openness and collaboration, not merely as a strategy, but as the foundation of who we are. As Jim narrated real stories from his one-on-one meetings, a new energy enveloped the room. He highlighted Lisa's passion, Mark's apprehensions, and Sarah's innovative ideas. They were not just employees, they were individuals with unique dreams, struggles, and aspirations. By shifting our approach, we can harness this collective strength, allowing us to innovate and adapt more effectively than before, he asserted confidently. The board listened intently as Jim incorporated data from their recent team gatherings. Satisfaction scores were on the rise, and productivity metrics showed a favorable uptick. But the most compelling evidence came from the stories. The first time Sarah's ideas led to a successful prototype, or the moment when Mark transformed his skepticism into enthusiasm for a new project. Their experiences became his rallying cry for change. An unexpected warmth began to fill the space as Jim transitioned to addressing the board's apprehensions directly. "I understand the risks outlined in our previous discussions," he said, his tone respectful and earnest. "However, I believe that the dividends of this transformation, trust, adaptability, and commitment, will far outweigh the initial challenges we face. Together we can reshape our future." For the first time in months, Jim felt not just the weight of leadership, but the exhilaration of purpose. People around the table nodded in understanding, and subtle glances of acknowledgement passed among the board members. It became clear they sensed an evolution in him, a sincerity that resonated beyond his words. As Jim concluded his presentation, a mix of tension and anticipation hung in the air like a charged current. The board members exchanged thoughtful murmurs before the most influential among them spoke. "Jim, your willingness to engage with the entire team and embrace vulnerability speaks volumes. Let's work on adapting your vision into actionable objectives." Relief washed over him, releasing the tension that had gripped him moments before. But this was not just a victory for Jim, it was a significant milestone for his team, a clear acknowledgement of their collective potential. Days turned into weeks as Jim watched the tangible effects of his efforts unfold. Weekly strategy sessions, once stifled by top-down directives, transformed into collaborative workshops where creativity flourished. The previously palpable fear of layoffs gradually dissipated, replaced by enthusiasm and investment in shared goals. Jim could see Sarah's initiatives taking root, embraced by the entire team. In a retrospective glance, Jim marveled at how far he had come. The isolation once characterized by success now transformed into a deep bond, reflecting an authentic connection that had been missing. He thrived in this new environment, leading not from a place of authority, but as a facilitator of shared dreams. One bright afternoon, as he stood in the very conference room where everything began, Jim reflected on the journey. He looked out at the city skyline, the weight of loneliness that had once consumed him, now replaced with a sense of belonging and fulfillment. He had accomplished not only professional growth but also personal transformation. His vision had become a tangible reality, demonstrating the power of leadership steeped in vulnerability and trust. Finally, he felt equipped not just to face challenges, but to inspire others, transforming not only his team, but himself. His narrative was no longer one of fear, but a celebration of the triumphs born from empathy and collaboration. As he prepared to address the next phase of their project, he felt an unshakable confidence. Jim Parker was now not just a leader by title, but a transformative force, one who had conquered fear, embraced his team's spirit, and thrived as part of a community dedicated to collective success. Now it's your turn to embrace transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It's vital. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of empowering each other through these actions.